Hello, hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I'm your host, Objectively Dan, and this is the live call-in show where we talk about what people believe and why. Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time every single week. And every single week, I have a very special guest. This week is no different. It is activist and musician Ro. Ro, what's going on?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, awesome. I also have another guest here with the look. It's Pico, guys. He's right here. He hasn't been on camera in quite a while since I moved into my new setup here. So now you guys can see he's trying to suck on my thumb here. I don't know what's up with that, but yeah, he's here. I know you guys been wanting to see him on camera, so here he is. He is just fine, just doing his little Pico thing. So follow my social media for more pictures of Pico there. Ro, what's going on tonight?
I'm good. I'm just settling in and just enjoying this moment, just trying to soak it up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I am super glad you're here. You were actually recommended to us by a friend of the show, Mandisa Thomas,
That's right.
who's in charge of the organization Black Nonbelievers.
Yes.
And you have your own experiences with religion. We were talking a little bit before the show. I came in a bit late tonight. And we weren't able to chat a whole lot, but I'm really excited to explore that a little bit. I want to start just with your story with religion. Where does that come from? Where did it all begin?
So I was thinking about this earlier today. When I think about, I turned 43 this year in March, and I was thinking about it's about 13 years that I have been outside of the Christian bubble, well, maybe not entirely, but certainly outside of a particular conviction in Christianity. And so that's about 13 years, I'm sorry, of being a non-believer. And there were a lot of roads that came through, but just, in terms of my life's journey, that's only 13 years. That's 30 years essentially that I was a Christian. I was Christian when I was, I think, a year old or something like that. And so, I'd spent most of my life being a Christian, even though I wasn't always super devout or anything like that. But I am from the Virgin Islands. I'm from the U.S. Virgin Islands. So we'll start there. St. Croix, USVI. We are one of the territories, colonies of the United States. And
Oh, you're not wrong.
yeah, and I'm from Christian said St. Croix, and so lived there, grew up there partially till about 9 years old. Then we moved to the States as a family, and so I moved, in when I was about 9, and the particular denomination that I come from is a denomination that is very characteristic of Christian Protestants in the Virgin Islands, which was formerly the Danish Virgin Islands. And one of the big Christian missionaries that came there many, many years ago, prior to the abolition of Danish slavery, was the Moravians. And you'll find a lot of Moravian churches in St. Thomas and St. John, and well, maybe not St. John. I'm sure there may be one, but certainly St. Thomas and St. Croix. There are Moravian churches. And when we moved to the States, we also had a Moravian church that I was very much involved in. I was not just going, I was playing. I'm a musician, as you mentioned. And so I grew up in the Moravian church. I also grew up having a lot of musical experiences through that, playing organ and piano and, recitals and things like that. And also playing for service. I think I played my first actual church service when I was 13. And that's in the Washington, D.C. area. So and one of those churches was in DC. And so, I was just, I was a kid, I'm just, that's what I was. I was a kid, but I was always playing. I've always been musical. And I've always practically my entire life been studying and playing music in some form. Fast forward a little bit down the line, I started to take up singing through some theater and acting that I was doing as a teenager. And so in addition to playing, I was singing and traveling and touring with this production company. I ended up singing just really kind of took off and almost eclipsed my playing. And then I auditioned to to study music at Berklee College of Music in Boston, and I got a scholarship to study voice there. So I went and did that and studied singing and music and just more music, more music, more music. And in After that, I continued music career, just all the kinds of shows and touring and stuff like that. And While I was in school, I should just back up a little bit. While I was in school, I found out at some point that I could play for church as a way of supporting myself through school. And I started to play in a Presbyterian church, and then I also played in a Black Catholic church. I think I had some experiences playing in an AME church at that time. Moved to New York, started playing for other churches. I played for a Baptist church. I played a little bit for a Pentecostal church. I played for, if anybody is listening who's of a certain age, I played for Reverend Ike. I don't know if anybody out there knows Reverend Ike, but if you're over 50 or 60 years old, Reverend Ike was one of the first prosperity gospel preachers. This is pre-TD
Oh,
Jakes.
interesting.
This is I think maybe around the time Oral Roberts was doing his thing. You had,
Oh, wow.
This is back in those days, like 60s into the 70s. He was one of the first preachers to really emphatically talk about money as a means of experiencing the blessings of God. And it had a resonance specifically to the people because he was speaking in minority communities. He was, particularly in New York, and a lot of the people were, suffering, all kinds of poverty and economic marginalization and stuff like that. So that was a message that rang, right? And
Sure.
and so you might not have had TD Jakes and, Creflo Dollar and some of these other people were it not for, Reverend Ike, because he paved the way for that. So I played in a lot of different churches. Long story short, singing,
a lot of
playing.
churches.
Yeah, I'm an artist and I'm a songwriter, and so I was doing my music career, other stuff alongside that. But one of the things that grounded me musically and also just financially, just to sort of survive as an artist, was to play in church, and that's kind of just what we all did. So I'll just try to shorten it up and say that years later, I started to play for a Baptist church, a Black Baptist church, and I spent about 10 years at that particular church in Brooklyn, New York, and in that 10 years, around 2005 or 6, I started to also play for SDA church, a Seventh-day Adventist church. And so if you don't know, I know you probably know, but Seventh-day Adventist churches worship on the Sabbath. That's Saturday. Right. And so I played basically Saturday and Sunday. And culturally, there was a difference as well, because the SDA church was nothing but West Indians like me. And so it was very comfortable to be in fellowship with them and to just kind of be in that mix, people that sound and talk like my aunts and my uncles and my parents and stuff like that. And then also on Sunday, playing in a Black Baptist church, an American Black Baptist church, different culture, similar culture, but very different music, different styles, and also different denomination. And I had already begun some questioning, right? I'd already started to kind of question, and I had a long sort of prelude of skepticism. I didn't get into that, but I can talk about that later. I'd already had a long prelude of skepticism early in my life, and I just kind of, let it just go. But when I started playing for the SDA church and the Baptist church, it just kind of came back, and that began the process of just really kind of, just being critical about what I was hearing between the Sabbath and Sunday, because it was almost like two different complete messages. It was supposedly the same God, but it was two different theologies,
right?
And two different, and also at that time, this is pre-gay marriage. This is pre, national sort of court ruling. So we were just starting to get into this state by state issue of legislating gay marriage.
Yeah.
And particularly in New York, that was like a big thing. Churches were really, really riled up about that. And it was a hot topic. And so, there was almost almost like no Sunday that I couldn't hear some kind of message like that that was explicitly um, anti-gay, fear-based, sort of apocalyptic language, all of that stuff.
Right.
And it just was a lot. And I'm a queer Black man, so I also during this time am sort of coming into my own understanding of myself, and also just kind of trying to reconcile my own spirituality in a queer identity. And so to hear these people talking like that, and I'm like, I don't think anybody knew, but I'm just like, they're talking about me, and like they just don't, So my experience of all of that kind of just led me on out, and somewhere around 2010 or 11, at one point I just woke up. I was agnostic, and I was very much all right with that. And then one day I woke up and I was like, I don't believe this anymore. So I can be an agnostic, but I can also just say I don't believe this anymore.
Yeah.
And that was about a little over 10 years ago.
Yeah. And 10 years later, how do you feel now looking back? Or do you feel more confident in your skepticism? Do you miss being a believer? What does that look like?
So it's weird. As a musician, I'm very much tied into the music and the traditions, culturally and musically, that shape, what I do as a singer and as a musician, as a pianist. So there are certain things that I still enjoy. I still enjoy listening to gospel music. I grew up, singing in choirs, and the one thing I will say I probably miss is being in a choir. I miss choir singing. That's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun singing in choirs with other people, and just the songs and just all of the clapping and
right.
It's exciting. I don't miss the theology. So,
right. I feel the same way. It's like, there is a sense of community there. I mean, there's a reason why it's appealing to so many people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like beyond just the teachings there, which are hit or miss. There is a sense of you're with other people who like ideologically conform with your ideas and probably vote the same way you do. So like there's something there to that that I do think back positively on. But at the same time, I can't look back on it and say it was all good, because even in that experience there's like a blocking feature there where it's like I didn't get to hear the voices of like the people in my life that were atheists. I didn't even know it. Or the people who had different lived experiences than I did, because I had these blinders on there. So I don't know, it's tough. It's tough to look at that.
It's complex, and there is certainly a part of me that understands why it's such a powerful pull, like you said. And I know that, I also know that, being a non-believer and being an atheist or an agnostic, I know that that's also not for everybody.
Right.
It takes a lot to be bold and cold in this kind of identity.
Yeah.
And it's work, and not everybody wants to do that work. And then at the same time, I see that value culturally and musically. Especially, I mean, to be a gospel singer, to be a singer, period, or a Black singer, right? So much of our singing is out of that, right?
Yeah.
And there's just not a whole lot of ways that you can sort of do that without that influence and do it well. So I understand that somebody needs to believe it, because it's a part of what we source our musical traditions from. And so I recognize somebody's going to believe it. But I have a certain kind of impatience, I guess I should say, for the theology as applied, as a lived experience, given what Black people especially have gone through and continue to go through. And I think that it's high time that we be critical in our evaluation of those traditions.
I agree with that. It's for folks who don't live in the United States, or like maybe aren't familiar, but like there is a difference in church culture in Black communities than there are in other communities here. And it's weird. Like it was Martin Luther King, I think, that said like Sunday is the most segregated hour. The Sunday is the most segregated hour in America, and that's still true to this day. Like, there's just a it's weird to think about it like that, because Christianity is supposed to be this universal religion, and yet different, minority communities experience the religion differently. I don't know. Obviously, I'm a white guy. So like I went to a church with mostly other white people. Mm-hmm. And I look back at that and I wonder how much of that was because we weren't a welcoming space for other people. Because like I grew up in a Baptist church in my teenage years, and it was mostly just kids around the suburban neighborhoods and stuff like that. But I lived in a city. I lived in Waco, which was a city where you can still see the lines where these neighborhoods were segregated, and you can still see the results of years and years of people blocking each other out. And I look back at like when I, spent time doing that work with the homeless or going reaching out, and I was wondering, like, I don't know, was it the best that I could have done? If it was really what Jesus really wanted, was it what, are we looking at that, or am I thinking about, is this like Republican Jesus? Like there's a difference there in the theology that you're talking about, right?
Yeah. So. I think one of the biggest things that everybody needs to admit is that there is a refrain that we are taught, that we like to think that we are worshiping the same God. But when you really objectively look at Dan, when you objectively look at what people are worshiping, what people are believing, what people are praying to, what they are praying for, you have to at some point be honest about, we're talking about a different God. Yeah. And that's what I was saying. What I was saying, even within a Black community. So it's the same in Black communities. Like, as I was saying, I played for SDA church, all West Indian. Everybody there was from St. Vincent, from, Trinidad, from Antigua, a few people from Jamaica, mostly. Yeah. And what I was hearing there and what I was hearing in the Baptist church on Sunday, they were two different gods that people were talking about. Now, interestingly, it all comes together when it's time to be anti-gay. So it was that's the same God. But
when it comes to the voting, that's when
But if
together,
but
the culture is different there. Like there is an entire like you have Christian movies, and then you have like Black Christian movies. Like Tyler Perry has made a whole industry on this. Like seriously, like there's such a huge divide there, and it's really weird to me. I don't like, because like ideologically you'd think everybody's on the same page there, but the weird thing is when you see, like, I'm going to call it white Christian movies, you always have like the Black token characters in those too. Like that's so common that it's become its own trope. So
I've never seen white Christian movies, and so tell me all about it.
Go watch every God's Not Dead movie. They get it in all three of them, I'm pretty sure. Just full disclosure, I spent a lot of time around white people when I was growing up. I mean, I grew up in when we moved to the States, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. Our Moravian church in the States was a predominantly white denomination. I spent a lot of time going to church camp. I went to church camp in Hope, New Jersey, Camp Hope, and I grew up going to church. In that church camp in the woods, and we had great memories, and we had all kinds of fun things, canoeing and vespers and all that kind of stuff. But I was, growing up, my sister and I were one of the 3, maybe 4, on a good day 5 or 6 Black kids. So it's interesting. I don't remember seeing white Christian movies, but I definitely spent a lot of time around other white Christians. That was just my environment. So at least here in the States, but the Black Christian movies are they're a thing too. And Tyler Perry is a whole nother subject, so I'm gonna follow your lead and go wherever you want to go, because we could go in a real rabbit hole with that one. We should definitely get to some calls here in just a second, but I do want to ask you, now that you sort of identify as a non-believer, you know, that you don't have those experiences, you review them differently now. What is that like for you in relationship with your queer identity and your Black identity? Like, do you think the intersection there really matters with your status as a non-believer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. They are all um, linked. They are all integral to what it takes to recognize the dilemmas and the contradictions and the political and societal sort of struggles, um, and walls or barriers that you have to overcome to reconcile those things. I would not have been able to let's just highlight the queer identity thing. I identify as a bisexual man. The idea of me being comfortable with that, with saying that, with coming into that space requires a certain kind of heresy, right? It requires a certain kind of examination, critical examination of there's that word again, critical. There's it requires a critical examination of theology as applied, as taught, as propagated, not only in my lifetime, but in generations. The idea of heteronormativity, heterosexism, anti-gay, homophobic sort of propaganda, and so forth, and just the idea of being able to question requires that you examine what you've been taught about a god or a deity as it relates to your sexuality, and being able to get to a place where you can say, I'm okay with having this identity. I'm okay with having this experience. I'm okay with doing this thing, going to this place, going to a club. I mean, this is back, when people had, clubs and stuff in pre-pandemic.
Right.
But
what a time.
Yeah. But the idea of just being able to walk into a space with other LGBT people and sit. I remember one of the first places that I started to find community in New York. And I lived in New York for a good 10 years, and I had stayed away from, the gay part of town and all that kind of stuff. I remember just absorbing all of these messages of, othering, inferiority, people, castigating, gay folks. People talk about, don't go down Christopher Street. You on West 4th, you stay straight. Don't walk down 6th Ave. Don't turn left or whatever, because those are where the gays are. And I remember for years, like literally not even daring to go down that street. And I was not out. Like I had not even begun to process my own sexuality in a real critical way, but I just wouldn't go there because it was just like, don't do that. And, the people who taught me that were people in church, to the point where I spent a lot of years there, just not even going down that street because I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to be, walking down places and, God forbid, a spirit of homosexuality, like, leap out, from the subway or whatever. but, like, and
a Jezebel spirit or something,
a Jezebel spirit in reverse,
Yeah.
And so, like, I say all that to say, in terms of identity, in terms of criticizing that, evaluating that, and reconciling that, all of those things absolutely intersect, and you have to face it, and you have to dare to say, I disagree, I dissent. And that's what the whole idea of, coming to terms with all of this intersectionality really comes down to. You have to recognize how they intersect, and then you also have to dissent.
Yeah. To like, I want to make a quick point here before we get to calls here, but like, because I can already see people saying, well, Christianity is about being with everybody, and it's about being accepting, and it's about, like, yes, I understand, like, okay, yeah, liberation theology exists. Okay, I get it. There's churches out here in Austin that will have gay pride flags out there and stuff. Okay, but like that was not a thing like 5 years ago. That was not a thing like 15 years ago for most people, and like this is like a new development for a lot of people, and that's a sign of the times changing, not that like this religion was always this way. Like, and I'll give you an example of this. When I interned at Baylor University for a little bit at the Texas collection there. I believe I've told the story before, and I found some collections of some church published sort of chick tracts on people voting on Virginia v. Loving, I think it was, which was the Supreme Court decision for interracial marriage. Okay, these tracts were telling people not to be in support of interracial marriage. These are from churches and stuff. Okay, and like you know, it's not like we were less Christian in the 1960s. Okay, like people you know, had their own theological reasons as to why a white man and a black woman couldn't get married. Like they were always justifications for this, and like this oppression goes back way farther back than people realize, and intersects in a lot of different complicated ways than people realize. So, you know, like any Christians watching this who want to talk about to us today, who want to say, hey, like, we're actually really cool. I get it. You might be cool. Like, not everybody's cool. You know, like,
I always, you know, I find that the people who are cool, so to speak, are people. The denomination, however, is not cool. The people who run your denomination, it's likely that those people are not cool. You're cool. And so good for you. But let me hear it from your bishop. Let me hear it from the denomination, and then maybe we can talk.
Right. But the ability for me to accept queer people as people and treat them with the same respect that I give anybody else, that didn't come from the Holy Spirit. Okay, that came from me actually having queer friends and recognizing like their lived experiences, and like realizing, hey, I was like, me believing the things that I believed was actively causing harm in their lives, both in big ways and in small ways, just in my presence sometimes. Like, you know, like that's hard when you're in the same room with somebody that doesn't accept you for just who you are as a person. And like, we're still overcoming this as at least the United States as a nation is still trying to figure these issues out. You know, gay marriage in particular only legalized as nationwide just like 6 short years ago now, I think. Like that's not enough time to like fully reconcile things. So when people talk about like, oh, this is like a solved issue now, it's not a big deal. No, it's still a big deal. We're still dealing with like the ramifications of a lot of this.
Ask any Coney Barrett if it's resolved. Or, you know, the justices.
Absolutely.
Ask the people in those churches who are still preaching against all of this if it's resolved. Yeah.
It's something worth talking about. And folks, we want to talk to you tonight about all of this and more. This is Truth Wanted. This is a call-in show. So I'm joined again here with Ro today as my guest. Activist and artist, really cool guy, really excited to keep talking with you. Before we get to your calls though, I want to give a quick shout out to the patron of the week. Every single week we give a shout out to the patrons who help donate to this program. Thank you all to everybody who donates to the show, but we want to give a special shout out this week, and this week's patron of the week is James Grobe. Thank you, James Grobe, for donating to patreon.com/truthwanted. And if you would like to donate to the show is mostly run by volunteers like myself, who help make this thing happen every single week. And you can help by getting new equipment and help us with getting Grubhub, you know, for all of our volunteers so that they can eat tonight. You can do that by going to patreon.com/truthwanted. So thank you, everybody that donates to the show.